Think about this for a second. A war so violent it killed more Americans than pretty much every other U.S. war combined. A conflict that pushed an entire nation right to the edge, testing its very soul. Okay, let's get into it. This is the story of how the United States was truly forged in fire.
You know, that quote, it just perfectly sums up the sheer drama of what we're talking about here. This is not your boring high school history class. No, this is a thriller. It's packed with unbelievable twists, legendary figures, and these impossible choices that literally shaped the world we are all living in today. And it all boils down to one fundamental question. How on earth did it ever come to this?
You see, before the first shot was even fired, the United States wasn't really united. It was already two completely different worlds living under one flag, a powder keg of tension just waiting for a spark. And this right here, this lays out that deep, deep divide. So in the North, you've got this booming industrial economy, factories, cities, railroads, all pushing towards the future. But down south, a totally different world, an entire empire built on cotton. And that empire was powered by the brutal, horrific institution of slavery, enslaving 4 million human beings. I mean, we're not just talking about a clash of economies. These were two clashing civilizations.
And for decades, politicians tried to just kick the can down the road. They kept slapping these little political band-aids on a massive sinking ship, making compromises to try and balance the number of free and slave states, but they never fixed the root problem. Each deal was just a temporary fix, delaying the inevitable, until 1860. The election of one man finally shattered that fragile peace.
And that man was, of course, Abraham Lincoln. But forget the marble statue for a second. This guy, he was something else. He wasn't some fancy East Coast elite. No, this was a man who grew up in a one-room log cabin, a guy who literally taught himself law by candlelight. His integrity was legendary. They called him Honest Abe. But the one thing he absolutely would not back down on was stopping the spread of slavery into new territories. And for the South, that was a direct attack on their entire way of life. His election was the final straw.
So, Lincoln wins the election, and before he can even really unpack his bags at the White House, bam, 7 states have already seceded. They're out. And right away, he is faced with this absolutely impossible choice. There's a Union fort, Fort Sumter in South Carolina, and it's running out of food. So what do? Send troops and guns? That's an act of war. Do nothing? You look weak, and the Union crumbles. I mean, talk about a no-win situation.
So Lincoln, he tries to thread the needle. It's actually a pretty clever move. He sends only food, no guns, no ammo. He's basically putting the ball in the South's court, testing their intentions. But they didn't care. For 34 straight hours, Confederate cannons just bombarded that fort. And while miraculously no one was killed in the actual attack, the message was loud and clear. The time for talking was over. The war had begun.
You know, it's wild to think about now, but both sides honestly expected this whole thing to be a quick, glorious little adventure. People in Washington, D.C. literally packed picnics to go watch the first battle, like it was a football game. Boy, were they wrong. The nation was about to plunge into a horrific, bloody stalemate, and the Union desperately needed a general who could actually win.
So on one side, you have the Confederacy's ace in the hole, Robert E. Lee, an absolutely brilliant and audacious tactician. On the other side, the Union's big hope is George McClellan. He's also brilliant, a fantastic organizer, but, and this is a huge but, he was fatally cautious. The guy hated taking risks, and that one flaw was going to haunt the Union Army again and again.
And here's where the story takes a turn that you just can't make up. Get this. Lincoln's first choice to command the entire Union Army was Robert E. Lee. Can you even imagine? Lee himself was against secession, he called slavery a moral evil, but at the end of the day, he just couldn't bring himself to fight against his home state of Virginia. That one, personal decision, gifted the South its greatest weapon.
The country very quickly learned the real cost of this war. At the Battle of Shiloh, a Union victory led by a then little-known general named Ulysses S. Grant, the casualties were just staggering. Look at this number, over 23,000 men dead, wounded, or missing. That's more than in all of America's previous wars combined, in one battle. And the horror was really just getting started.
Then something happens that is so lucky, it sounds fake. As Lee's army is invading the North, a Union soldier is just walking through a field and finds a piece of paper on the ground, wrapped around 3 cigars. And it turns out to be Special Order 191, Lee's entire, complete battle plan. Every detail, where his divided army was, what they were going to do. It was literally the playbook to destroy the rebellion, just lying there in the grass.
So they have the playbook, right? This should have been an easy win. But what followed was just absolute carnage. The Battle of Antietam, it goes down in the books as the single bloodiest day in American history. A single cornfield changed hands 15 times. A sunken road became forever known as Bloody Lane. By sunset, 23,000 more casualties. It was a brutal draw, really, but Lee was forced to retreat. But Lincoln, ever the strategist, used this moment of quote-unquote victory to completely change the very nature of the war. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Now this was a calculated military move as much as it was a moral one. It only freed slaves in the rebelling states, not the ones loyal to the Union. But the impact? Oh, it was immense. It reframed the whole conflict. This wasn't just a war to preserve a country anymore, it was now a crusade for freedom.
And that masterstroke made it politically impossible for anti-slavery countries like Britain and France to ever support the Confederacy.
So the war raged on, but the summer of 1863, that would be the beginning of the end. In one single fateful month, two massive battles, fought hundreds of miles apart, would effectively seal the Confederacy's fate.
First up, in Pennsylvania, the largest battle ever fought on the continent. For 3 days at Gettysburg, the two armies just hammer each other. Day 1, the Confederates are winning. Day 2, the Union line holds on by a thread. And then, on day 3, Lee makes a final desperate gamble. A massive assault right at the Union center. It was called Pickett's Charge, and it was a devastating, catastrophic failure.
And at almost the exact same time that the survivors of Pickett's Charge were stumbling back, something equally decisive was happening 900 miles away. General Ulysses S. Grant, after a long, brilliant siege, finally captured Vicksburg, the last Confederate fortress on the Mississippi River. This victory gave the Union total control of the river, literally splitting the Confederacy in two. Yep, July 1863. That was the turning point.
Lincoln had finally found his general. He promotes Grant to command all the Union armies, and Grant brings with him a new, absolutely brutal philosophy, one shared by his most trusted general, William T. Sherman. Grant's plan was simple: use the Union's advantage in numbers to just grind Lee's army into dust, no matter the cost. And Sherman's job? To wage total war, to break the South's very will to fight.
And this quote, it perfectly captures the grim, cold logic of this final phase of the war. Sherman's march to the sea was just that. It was a 300-mile-long path of destruction right through the heart of Georgia, destroying railroads, factories, farms, anything that could possibly support the war effort. It was all about making the war so terrible for the Southern people that they'd lose all hope.
By the spring of 1865, the Confederacy was on life support. Lee's army was starving, surrounded, and completely exhausted. With no hope left, no path of escape, Lee sent a request to Grant to meet and discuss the terms of surrender.
And that final meeting is just this incredible study in contrasts. You have Grant, the relentless victor, who shows up in a simple mud-stained uniform looking like he just came from the field. And then you have Lee, the defeated Southern gentleman, who arrived in his absolute finest dress uniform, determined to surrender with dignity.
But what happened next was truly remarkable. Instead of punishment, Grant offered grace. Confederate soldiers could simply go home. They could even keep their horses to help with the spring planting. He promised no treason trials, no executions, no revenge. Grant's goal wasn't to punish. It was to begin the long, painful process of healing a fractured nation.
The war was over. The Union was saved. But, in a final, unbelievably cruel twist of fate, the architect of that victory would not live to see the peace. Just 5 days after Lee surrendered, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The man who had guided America through its absolute darkest hour was killed on the very cusp of a new dawn, leaving a broken nation to try and heal without its greatest leader.
In the end, modern estimates actually put the death toll closer to 750,000 Americans. The war redefined this nation. It destroyed the institution of slavery, and it gave America what Lincoln called a second birth of freedom. But when you look back at the sheer scale of that sacrifice, you are left with this one haunting question that still echoes today. Was the cost worth it?